Hi, I'm Alex, your host, and this is No Code World Radio, in which I travel the world to meet the most interesting people in the no-code space. I have finally reached the last destination of this trip, Berlin. Germany's capital is also an international tech hub, and without any surprises, many no-code companies are based here. I will try to meet as many as I can while I'm here. That won't be easy necessarily because everyone is quite busy, but let's see. First on the list is Jan from the automation software n8n that I was very eager to meet because I think it's a very promising tool and also one of the very few that is open source. Can't wait for this conversation. This is episode 5 of season 1 of the No Code World Radio podcast. Hello, Jan, and thank you so much for taking the time to meet me here in Berlin, in your very nice office. So you're the founder of n8n, an automation tool that is licensed as fair code, which I believe is quite unique in the no-code space. So I'm very curious that you tell us about all this. But first of all, can you please introduce yourself?
Hello. First, thanks for inviting me. Great to have you with us in our office today. I'm Jan. I'm the founder and CEO of n8n. We started around, I think, open sourced, open fair code licensed the product around 2.5 years ago, and over a little bit 1 year ago, the first people started, and now we are nicely growing. So quite happy. Yeah.
Cool. So what just to know a little bit more about your background, what did you do before? Maybe even like what did you study? And so I like to have a little bit of the background.
My background, I studied called audiovisual media. So it had a lot of different fields, like from event to movies to VFX to computer animation to sound. It covered a lot of different subjects, and everybody kind of specialized on one field. I specialized on computer animation and VFX. That means I worked after I finished university. I worked for 5 years, I think, in a VFX space. Originally, it was called compositing, which is like you combine the filmed images with the computer generated ones, and you make them look good and make sure that they seamlessly fit together, and that they don't add fire or whatever they want for that movie. And then later I did transition in a role of a pipeline entity. That means my job was there not to make the pictures anymore. It was to make the life of the artist more efficient, which obviously involved a lot of automation. And that's how the whole journey started.
Okay.
And after that, I left the movie industry. I started another startup called Linkfish, was like kind of smart bookmarking. And after that, or actually at the same time, at n8n started as a side project. And I think that was the most important points of my professional career.
Okay, cool. So you started on your own that was really like a side project, sorry. And so you coded everything yourself?
Yeah, I started, it was probably beginning of 2018 at some point. Yeah, like just to solve my own problems. And I looked at solutions, did not find anything. So I just imagined how would a tool work that I want to use. And then I just started programming for like 1.5 years, part-time. I still worked at my other startup and part-time at a different job to earn some money.
Okay.
And then we launched in June 2019. I launched on GitHub. Then we had the founding round closed like at the beginning of the year 2020. And then in April, the first other people joined. Yeah, I think the first 4 joined then in April.
Okay, so until the funding round, you were still on your own? Mm-hmm. Okay, that's interesting. But did you have already, but maybe we'll get a little more into that later, but like contributors? Because that's one of the things of, I guess, opening the code. But I mean, I guess we'll have to talk a little bit more about what is n8n and how it works. But I guess there is all those opportunities for other people to join in and write extensions and things like that, or plugins, but yeah, before we jump into that, because it might be a bit technical, I prefer to have, how do you describe n8n? And also you have to tell me, why did you choose this name? Because I'm quite curious.
First about the name, because I was alone and I had to focus, I did not have a lot of time to think about some stuff a lot. And I also knew it did not matter that much in the end. Did I think a while for a name? All the ones I liked, they were taken. It's one that was on my list was Nodemation, because it was node-based. It's using Node.js and automation, but it was very long, and I didn't really like that. It did not look very nice in my eyes. So at some point, okay, then I came up with n8n, like the short form, and then eight letters in between, but also in a kind of Nodemation. It's like kind of sounds similar, and then it ended up to be n8n. It generally is n8n workflow automation tool, which means you can, if people know Zapier, Integromat, and Trello and others, it's very similar to those ones with a little bit different focus. But generally, like we have this node-based editor where each node in that flow represents one action, and then it sends data from one to another one. So you can say, get data from tool A, send it to tool B, for example. Every time a new lead gets created on Pipedrive, send me an email or anything like that. They can become very complex. So you can create very big flows with different conditions. So you can split the flow, you can merge it back together, and so you can automate very complex tasks very easily and fast.
Yeah, that's one of the things I really find very interesting is this node approach, because for me it's really in the automation space, really the tool that is really like visual programming, like literally, like Zapier, for instance, I really like because I think it's easy to use for beginners, but it's just one line, it's like one straight line, a sequential automation. Integromat is a bit more, okay, you can have like more, it's not a straight line, but still, it's not like really visual programming. You cannot really have those like if, else, then, kind of things. I guess it's a higher level of abstraction, but yeah, I think that's really one of the interesting things about n8n. That's also maybe one of the things that makes it a bit more difficult to approach. What's your, when you started this and you decided on this approach, what did you have in mind in terms of who would be the users of the tool?
Yeah, like Zapier is pretty much focused on this very simple use cases. Like they want to be the simplest tool out there. Our goal was, at least in the beginning, and that's my goal, was not to be the simplest tool, it was to be the most powerful tool. That's why it was totally okay for me to be more complicated. And that's why I also don't really see Zapier as a big competitor for us, because I think they're actually quite helpful. Like people, if they have this very simple use case, if they get started, they should start with Zapier. It's a perfectly nice tool where you can do this very simple stuff, and they're going to love it. At some point, do people reach that kind of limit, and then kind of before Zapier was the solution to your problem, suddenly it turns into the problem itself, and then it's a good time for people to switch over to a solution like n8n, where you can have this very complex workflows. Like even in Zapier, I think they also added something like conditional logic in there, but of the way it is built, it's nothing you want to build a complex workflow in. Yeah. It's not their target audience. No, so I think we actually work quite well together, and they really help us a lot because they really educate the market. They tell them what is automation, what can you do to get that whole wheel started, and they start with Zapier, come to us. So I think it's a very good relationship you can actually have with them there.
No, definitely. I think Zapier, that's why we're our first online course we made in Zapier, because we really want to have people who are beginning their journey into this automation to start there. And I think maybe Integromat is the next step, and then maybe n8n, or maybe for people who are more, like they can switch directly. But yeah, no, I like that you say that. I think it's really cool. Yeah, it's all this node approach, I think, is really powerful visually. Like Zapier, they introduced the looping recently.
Didn't see that yet.
But it just doesn't work, because your mind can't process, that it's a loop, because it still looks like a line. Okay. And that's what I like with the nodes, you see the line going back and forth, and it's so that's very interesting.
Actually, the background of that is actually like why I chose it is actually from the VFX industry, because all the tools I worked with, they also were node based. Yeah. So we created like these images in a node based fashion. So you sometimes had flows with like 1,000 nodes, like if it was a big scene with a lot of effects in it. But it was very complex, but at the same time, you could still very easily comprehend what is happening. You could see, okay, there I read the image, there I add a blur, there I merge them. So that's again my people also can use After Effects, but again, it's very similar. You can do amazing stuff in After Effects. It's the best tool to do motion graphics. But if you have this very complex scenes, you need this node-based tool. That's why I also thought it makes a lot of sense in the automation space generally.
And do you think, so how do you describe n8n? Do you describe it as a no-code tool or as a low-code tool? I'm just curious. I mean, that's...
Yeah. Generally, like we aim to be a no-code tool, but currently, because of some shortcomings, we are more of a low-code tool. Like there's some important operations, like for example, data transformations, which are not as easy as they should be, and you really have to fall back to code to do them. We are currently actually releasing very soon a data transformation node. It's called Item Helper, which is going to help there to at least solve the need of the most people. And then we're going one direction. This is really our plan. It's really our mission is to give everybody who uses a computer technical superpowers. So really, we aim to be that at some point, but at the same time, do we not want to lose like all the upside? Like I always describe it normally with Excel. Like Excel is this tool that's the first time you open it, you're totally confused. You have no idea what to do. But somebody gives you like a 15-minute introduction and you have a very good understanding, can start using it. And that's why I also think what we can reach, like people, I was going to probably look at n8n, like what is going on? Like they're totally confused. But if you then have somebody that gives you a short intro, you get you understand the first steps, and then you don't lose the whole upside. Again, like Zapier that has like this, how we call it, this glass ceiling. Like at some point you cannot go above it. But with n8n, we kind of front loaded. You kind of have the issues in the beginning, but it grows with you like indefinitely.
That's really interesting. Really interesting approach, and I really like that you say that you really aim at going toward no code, because we really truly believe also that that should be the aim for everyone.
Yeah.
I think for me, low code is just in general, not just with n8n, but just a intermediate step taking us towards no code. And I think in this way it's a bit similar with Bubble, for instance, has quite a steep slope of getting in, but then you can do amazing things. So I think it's good not to try also to compete with the kind of easiest and lowest, but to go more toward from the top.
But the nice thing is also like with n8n is like, even though we aim to be this no code tool, like you always have this code component in there. In the end, like I'm a programmer. I programmed it for people, also for people like me, because I realized there's a lot of boilerplate code you have to recreate again and again and again. It doesn't really make any sense. And because we also have like this code components in n8n, like you can always fall back to that code level again, which just gives you that full upside. So even the programmers have very often problems with this no code tools because they kind of feel like restricted. That somebody think I do it there, it's maybe nice in the beginning, but at some point it doesn't work anymore because they want to do something very specific and it doesn't work. But again, like we have a function node and everybody can literally create their own nodes like very easily. So they never have to feel that way because they can anytime fall back to that code level. And I think that's what makes it also interesting for our users, and which makes us a little bit special there.
Yeah, no, definitely. No, and it helps like in the meantime, before everything is abstracted, people can already use it, and for the developers, they will keep using it even after. So I think it's great. Before we talk a little bit about this open source part, could you give us some use cases of things you've seen with n8n, or maybe examples of clients?
There's actually that's interesting things. Again, I always use Excel. I think that's where we also have a lot of overlap there. Like Excel is this tool that people use literally everywhere, and they do the private vacation planning, and they use it in small companies, use it in large companies for literally every kind of use case. And we're a little bit similar there because like we have this very generic tool, like all we do, if you think about this, we receive some data, each node is processing the data. We don't really care what the data is about and what each node is doing. So you can create nodes to do literally everything you can do in Node.js or in normal programming also. So it means the use cases are also very broad. Like we have people creating chatbots, some people do security automation, e-commerce marketing, all that stuff people do in Zapier. People use n8n as a backend. People replace bash scripts. So that's the nice thing, because it's such a flexible tool, the use cases are so broad. Obviously it also comes with other problems, but currently we are this very widely used tool. And again, because people can extend it so easily, they never really feel like the tool doesn't work for them and it can grow with them. And so I think that's why it's currently very widely used for some clients. Like for example, one interesting one is, for example, one person, he created a startup which helps people to get tax IDs in Portugal. Apparently, you have to have a native, like a Portuguese person to apply for the tax ID. And he created a service around that, all with no-code tools. I think he's using stuff like Bubble and Airtable and n8n, and the whole logic is built in n8n. Okay. So he's not able to program, but he built out the whole logic for this quite complex app with no-code tools. Yeah. And that really shows how powerful it is. And we have some large corporations that use it again, like for something like security automation. There are a lot of tools already out there, but because again, we are maybe not open source, but we are fair code licensed, they can install it on their own infrastructure. They know where their code is running. They know the data does not leave the infrastructure, so they don't have to worry if they also have like customer data in their SOC 2 or GDPR, anything like that. And just the extensibility. I think that's really, really great with n8n.
Yeah, I think this part is very important too. It's good that you say that, because I think it's also a big difference being able to install the software on your own servers or even on your own computer. If it's on your own computer, it's not exactly the same as it's in the cloud in terms of network access, but it also can help doing some automations and things like that. Was it? What's the choice? Maybe if I give it a broader question about this fair code, and what was the idea behind all this for you?
When I started n8n, I wanted to make very sure that the tool is available for everybody to use for free. Meaning, like, I wanted to open source it, but I also was aware of the problems with open source. You see right now, like Elasticsearch, I don't know, AWS offers a service there, and then even forks it, and it's just becoming harder and harder to really have a project that can support itself and can improve if a lot of the value that's generated moves actually to external companies, like in this case AWS. Also was aware, if I, for example, would offer a hosted service, this external company, they could just copy the code, they offer hosted service, charge for it, and I would be kind of stuck to give everybody support for free and fix bugs, improve the product. This other company couldn't just pull it, the changes, and offer it again as a service. So it seems like the value does not go to really the companies that move the product forward. So that's why the open source companies go the open core route, meaning they leave very important features out to make money with them. That is, I'm not a very big fan of that, because it literally means I make my product artificially worse to earn money.
Is it like, when you mean by that, it's like, for instance, let's say GitLab, which is an open source version of GitHub. So they have like the community edition and then like the professional edition kind of things. That's
exactly, yeah.
Okay.
But the thing is, like, I think some companies do it quite well, but the thing is, you always have to think about, okay, which features do I give everybody? Which ones do I charge for? And if that's your only income stream, you really tend to think, okay, maybe a lot of people need it, but they're never going to pay. So I make this very important feature closed and take it away from people. And this literally means, like, I don't know, right now we have user management. It's a very important feature that we currently work on. A lot of people need it. And now we would just say, okay, that is something we would have to make closed source, that people have to pay for it. But because we have this fair code model and other ways to generate revenue, we can give that feature also to everybody. And at some point, okay, if it's really something that the normal people, small companies would not need, we could still make the closed source, but the barrier where you make the decision, you can move it up by a lot, because we have these other income streams. And the interesting thing about this fair code approach is, like, they literally right now, everybody, the whole code, even our hosted solution, all the code is available open, because there is no code difference. We use the same Docker image on the hosted solution, and the people can download it. Now I've lost the train of thought. Yeah, and with fair code, we have now this advantage that because the whole code is available, but people that want to use our code in their product and want to charge for it, they have to get a license. So meaning users are always free, but they say, hey, I have a SaaS solution. I want to add automation as for example, as a module to my existing product. And I don't want to program it myself. I don't want to create hundreds or thousands of integrations myself. And it is not my core competency here. That's why it would make sense to partner with another company. Those companies signed in a license agreement and you work together with them. They make sure that we are properly financed and can earn money and can improve the product. And again, the nice thing is like your interests are pretty much aligned. Like they depend for their product, they depend on n8n. They want to make sure that the company behind the project is healthy and pushes it forward. So they normally don't even have a problem with paying money. Very often they even want to do it, again, because it's in their own interest.
Yeah. So just to understand, I'm not a specialist about open source licenses, but so you don't say that n8n is open source in a way, but the code is completely open. It's just the way it's being used that is protected. Because I guess now what is kind of called the most open source license is the MIT license. No, it's the one that really gives any rights you can use to do it. What's normally used with most of the languages or the frameworks like Node or I don't know. And so you're using Apache 2 license? No,
Apache 2 is also an open source license. We use Apache 2 with Commons clause.
Okay.
The Commons clause is adding the restrictions.
Okay, and so basically what it means, just to try to make it clear, because I think it's quite interesting because people don't know about all this in general, and there is a lot of misconceptions about free software, open source, and also the business models around it. But basically you give, like, I can use n8n, I can download, I've done that, but I can't start a commercial service of hosting my own instance of n8n and having people using it in exchange of money, for instance. Exactly,
yeah. Like the difference is like open source, like literally everybody can say that the product is open source or not, because it's not a term that's protected by anything. But you have the OC, which is the Open Source Initiative, that kind of coined the term. So they defined a few licenses. They defined rules that the licenses have to follow to be able to call themselves open source license. Okay. More strictly, actually, OC approved open source licenses. Some of them are the MIT license, and the Apache 2 and many others.
GPL, no.
Exactly.
But then there's even several versions of it, and yeah, it's quite complex. I think it's interesting, but it's quite complex.
But all of these licenses, like they follow the according to what they defined, that they think, okay, they follow these rules they have defined.
Okay.
But the Commons clause clause we added to the Apache 2 takes away some of the rights, especially like you cannot commercialize it. And so it is against the rules are defined, and so we are not allowed to call ourselves OC approved open source. Again, we could still call ourselves open source theoretically, but which I did initially, but there was like quite an outcry and a lot of people complaining. So if you just search for Gaslight n8n, you get to a GitHub issue where there's a long conversation about us calling ourselves open source.
Okay.
And that's why we then started calling ourselves Fair Code to give this a kind of alternative term, because it's something more companies are moving to, like Elasticsearch moving in that, just change the license in that way. Sentry and many other companies moving away from OC approved open source because they all have the same issues, and that's why this was important to coin a new term that defines what it means. Because the only other term that people then use, if it's not open source anymore, they use source available. But source available literally means the source code is available. But it doesn't really mean you can use the source code. You can just look at it, but you maybe can't even use it at all because it's just a proprietary code. So it's a term that doesn't have any meaning. And that's kind of a useless term then. That's why I thought it was important to create a new term that makes it clear for people that it still follows pretty much what open source is, but it restricts you mainly in the commercial sense, which then allows people to make money there, and make sure that the value gets captured by the company that's pushing the product forward.
Okay, now that's very interesting. I will put in the show notes the link to the website that you made about Fair Code.
It's going to be helpful.
So I think it explains also this quite well if people want to go a little bit deeper. just a quick question in the same theme, and then we'll move on to something else. But is it more difficult to raise money when you are in this kind of approach? Or, I mean, does it change anything? I mean, or does it helps? Maybe, I don't know. I'm just curious.
You mean open source versus fair code?
No, I mean, in general, like
open source.
Let's say like the way you're doing it with, is it, I mean, what's the...
Actually, right now, like there's a lot of big funding rounds around open source companies. So like, I think originally they were very hesitant, but the last years, they really love to invest in open source, especially some companies. They're really bullish on it. So I think they're only, so I think it doesn't make a big difference. They're like, the nice thing with open source is like you can normally have a very big community already around it. They like that. If you get have people in the community, you have a lot of stars and they see a lot of usage, it's great. You obviously have some disadvantages, like very often you have no idea how many users you have. Again, if you have a SaaS solution, you know, I have 302 users. If you are open source, you think, okay, I have literally sometimes no number at all. Like you can look at some numbers, like, I don't know, how many stars do you have? How many people are part of the community? How many Docker pulls do I have? But all of these numbers don't really give you any exact number at all. Things like Docker pulls, like they're very volatile. Like literally we have some days 20,000 Docker pulls a day, and other days we have a million. Like this is not the number you can really do anything meaningful with for that reason. That's
just to explain for people who are not technical. Docker is an environment that makes it very easy to run, for instance, n8n on your computer or on a server. I hope there will be also like non-technical people listening to this. So, but no, it's interesting that this is one of the way you have to kind of measure. It's all out there, kind of in the wild. But so let's talk about this community part of because this is one of the big strengths of allowing people to see the code and also to contribute. So how does it work, for instance, on a project like n8n? Is everybody able to make, I guess there is two parts to this question. There is the kind of product management part, so suggest new features and things like that. And then there's more the code part and technical aspect to it. So people can contribute to the code, or can they contribute to the extensions? Let's start maybe with the code part, and then...
Literally, like they can actually contribute to everything. Like everything, all the code is available, even all the documentation is available. So people can contribute to whatever they want, can make changes, suggestions, and then open a pull request, then review it and merge it. Right now, like actually for the most open source projects, you have like normally like a kind of a core part that's like, for example, like you have to have a very deep understanding of the product to make changes there. So you have to spend quite some time on it, but you normally get less contributions and maybe just have a few people doing it. And then you have like this kind of outer ring where people can easier contribute code. In our case, it's integrations. Like they're quite easy to understand, and everybody, and that's the thing that's missing for the most people. Like, I don't know, I want to use service X. That integration doesn't exist, so I can just create it myself. That's what they're doing. And then they do it, they check out existing nodes, how does it work. We also have some good documentation about it, how to create a node. Then they test it, they contribute it, they open a PR, we review it, then we make very sure that all the nodes work in a similar fashion to make sure that it's easy for our users to understand it. Also, the code is written like in a clean way, because in the end, like, we're gonna maintain the code moving forward also, want to improve it. So that's important for us. And if everything, even if only small changes are needed, we make the changes ourselves to speed up the process. If larger things have to be refactored, we tell the users, okay, please change these things, and then review it again. Then we merge it, and literally every week we release a new version of n8n with improvements to the product and new integrations.
Because I guess for you, it's really a quite strategic thing, those integrations, because that's one of the big strengths of Zapier, for instance. Like they have, I don't know, 3,000 or something like that, integrations to existing services. So, and then the other ones like Integromat has, I don't know, 1,000 or something. You know, it's like there's a bit, they use this a lot as a marketing. But then you have, so I guess you have less because you're much more younger, but you have potentially the power of the community and I guess this is already in motion now. It's you don't have to build all the integrations. You can have people building if they want to interface with, I don't know, like I can't think of something, but I don't know, like a Coinbase or I don't know, like a crypto service that has an open API. They can write it and make it available for the community.
Exactly, and even the nice thing is like there's literally like there are tools n8n can integrate with, but other services like Zapier and Integromat cannot, because n8n you can literally run it on your own machine. So you can integrate. You can even, for example, we have a node that's called edit image, so you can literally render or like add text, for example, on an image, because it's running locally on your machine. You can theoretically integrate it with sound products, with video products, like everything that you have running locally that either has an API or you can access via the command line arguments. You can theoretically automate also with n8n.
Yeah, it's true. That's very interesting thing to put. Like we tend to think that everything is easier when it's in the cloud, and it's very abstracted. But that comes also with a lot of limitations. For instance, accessing. You were mentioning like process, like things that you execute, but also the files. If you want to access a local file, and you don't necessarily want to put on, I don't know, Dropbox or something, which would be the only way to use it in Zapier, for instance. And it would be like managing files with Zapier, for instance, it's just not great, But so that's interesting. Do you have I mean, I guess you don't really know, but do you think there's a lot of people who use n8n on their own machine?
Yes, again, we have no numbers there. The people run it locally, but normally they do it mainly for testing things. Because if you want, normally if you automate something, especially with external services, you kind of require n8n to run all the time. So they couldn't turn off their computer. And that's obviously a problem at some point, especially if most people have laptops. That's why the most people at some point move over to install it on a server. We are, however, also currently planning to kind of release a standalone version of n8n. Like right now, you need Docker or npm installed and Node.js installed to run n8n locally. So it's very hard for people to get started that are not programmers.
Yes.
With the version we want to create now, people can just download it like any other tool, click on it, and it starts.
Like a binary already.
Exactly.
Okay.
And
that's interesting.
Could then be much more used for this one-off use cases. I don't know. I have a folder full of images, and again, on each of them, I want to add some text on it, or I want to resize it, or I want to upload all of these files to an FTP server, and before I want to do something with them, or like literally anything you'd normally do manually on your computer, you can then automate like that. So it would be more this one-time things rather than how it currently works, that you kind of get an event from an outside source.
That's really interesting, because I never really saw it that way, but there is like, so we talk in the no-code space mostly about automations like in the cloud, but then there is this whole part, the RPA, kind of like, which is more local, and there's like I don't even remember actually the name of the tool, but some tools are, so they are made to kind of make automations on your computer. But I feel like you're kind of bridging this gap, and I think this is very interesting, because for what I've seen, like the RPA tools that we had some videos in the French community, they were quite complicated to use, and they were working in a very different way. And being able to do these kind of things in the same paradigm as n8n, I think that would be great. That's very interesting actually, because I mean I'm originally a programmer also, and I used to love to write scripts, and do things very quickly. But now I'm just tired of this, and I want to have a visual interface. And so, okay, that's... I
think like the kind of, with RPA, like you kind of sometimes really often need both tools. Like if you have, for example, like in the government space, they have sometimes programs they didn't update since 20 years. They don't have an API. If you don't have an API, or you can do anything via a CLI, you literally have to click the buttons. And there's no way around RPA. Nothing and can do about that. But the nice thing is like you can kind of marry both of them. So all we need is to literally create one node in n8n for an RPA tool, and you can say, okay, I do all the stuff I can do by an API, and then I have this one step, add this data into this program, then you create this kind of, I don't know how they call it, recipe in this RPA tool, send the data in there, the RPA tool does its job, and then goes back to n8n, and it does its thing there. So I think that's a very interesting combination to allow that.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Or to mix with like headless browsing, the kind of things to execute like some actions in the browser and then get there's many things. Well, that's exciting. And there's also a small feature. It's a bit technical, but maybe you can explain that I've noticed. I guess it's more for testing purposes, but the reverse proxy also, if you execute on your own machine, you can still have this incoming network.
Exactly, like it's for developing and testing mainly. So like the problem is if people start n8n locally, they can do their things, which is great. But at some point, if you want to connect it to, for example, Pipedrive, and you say every time a new lead is generated, something has to happen, Pipedrive needs a way to access your local machine, and it cannot do that. That's why we built a tunnel into n8n, meaning like instead of hitting your computer directly, does it hit our server, and our server is then redirecting that call, that data to your local machine. That allows you already to use n8n like very easily like that, and also test these features out. But it's the way it is currently set up. It's like it's nothing I would run any production workload on. It's like it's one server with it's called local tunnel me, another open source project that we're using there.
Okay.
I'm not sure how perfectly reliable it is. And it has some issues, like sometimes if a connection breaks, for example, because there's an internet problem, it kind of keeps that ID reserved. So it means the ID would change the next time you use it again. It could be a problem for some services. It's not perfect. That's why we say it's development and testing, but please don't use it for production, because we also cannot like tell you that it's up, I don't know, 100%, whatever. So please set it up on your own server, especially also if everybody would use it via tunnel, would be a lot of traffic and it would become slow. I can imagine.
No, I think it's nice that you did that for testing purposes, but yeah, definitely not for production, I think. Okay, just in terms of features and product management, how do you prioritize? How do you engage the community on those?
Currently, like it's just kind of we have kind of two things how we prioritize things are like what features we create. One is for sure the community, like they tell us in the forum, okay, we are interested in that feature, and then they can upvote that, and so we get a good idea which features they deem to be important and which integrations. On the other hand, do we identify interesting fields ourselves? We think, okay, and it would be super interesting in the security space. Then we think about use cases in that space and services we would, for example, need to make these use cases possible. Then we try to find a good mix between creating this which features to work on, and then we try to move forward in both fields, because you don't want to focus only on one or the other, because like maybe we are totally wrong. Maybe the community asks for stuff that actually nobody else needs. So that's why I think it's a good idea to try to think both ways, how to move forward and make sure you use it as efficiently as possible. Yeah.
It's interesting because I like to ask this question, because I see when I talk to all the no-code tool publishers, it's always this mix actually, because I feel like sometimes as a user, you see, you think it's very nice to have a public roadmap and you can vote on, but then in the end, the truth is also, I think the founders and the product managers, they have to have some sort of opinion
and a vision.
Yeah, exactly. And okay, you get information from the community, but you can't decide the community really on your roadmap. But no, I
think it's always interesting insight. It's for sure very helpful. I think you have to talk with them, and we think we definitely, we still have a lot of luck that we can. Actually, there's a lot of overlap between what we deem to be important and what the community is asking for. But I think that the further you move along and the more refined the product gets, the harder it will be.
Yeah, no, you need to get all the data you can to make your choices, but you also need to, I guess, make some bets, some your own choices. That's how you started. At the beginning, when you have no community, I guess you did all the choices. Just trying was also like very interesting. There's a lot. Maybe if you can tell us, you told a few things already, but what's on the roadmap? Actually, what's coming? Like, I don't know, until the end of the year. Or I don't know how long the vision you have?
Right now, like the main feature we're working on is user management. Like one problem we have with n8n right now is that we literally, you can kind of have any users, or you have one user, depending how you want to see it, they can do everything. So if you have two people using the same n8n instance, they can see their workflows from each other, and even worse, they can see the credentials from each other. So if you would connect to your Gmail account, that person could query your emails. So that's not really usable. That's why some companies fall back to literally install an n8n instance for each user, which again makes it very hard to maintain. That's why we are working currently on user management, which will then allow that you have like specific teams and groups where you can say, okay, I have this workflow, I share it with somebody else. That person can use that workflow with the credentials for that workflow, but I can, for example, not access them or use them for anything else. So you get like very fine-grained control, and then you can actually finally use n8n in a bigger company setup. Because like with the setup I described previously, like if everybody has their own instance and I don't know, one workflow breaks, only that one person can fix it. And that's obviously not great. And that's really the most important thing we're working on. Generally, are we working pretty much on to other things that are very important. One is for sure making n8n easier to use, because like I talked previously before about it, like currently we are probably more low code than no code, and the onboarding generally, and so we really think what things are currently causing the biggest problems for our users, and how can we solve it, and there's still currently a lot of thinking going into that. And also what we call n8n 1.0, like the currently it's still, we have version 0.131.0. So like we still don't have the version 1.0 released yet. And we are aware of some inconsistencies in n8n. We are aware of some things we want to change if we want to move forward. That also requires some breaking changes. And so currently we're making sure to implement all of these features we think are important to get this version out. And as soon as we have that, then we can move forward like in a safe fashion. And we know we don't have to do any more breaking changes for a while, because they're obviously always very bad for any kind of product. Yeah. So that's why we kind of want to really focus on getting that out as soon as possible to avoid it moving forward.
Okay. There's something we didn't mention is the cloud option that you offer, which I think has very, very interesting pricing. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, our cloud offering is literally the same as our normal offering, what we code-wise, but it has some very strong advantages, especially for not coders, as you literally sign up with your email address and your credit card number, and it manages all for you. It makes sure it keeps on running. We make sure the data gets backed up, all the stuff you normally would have to worry about yourself. Also does it, for example, make it very easy to authenticate with services. The problem with an open source or fair code tool like ours is that things like OAuth 2, which people probably know, like when you authenticate, for example, for Google, via Google, you press like a button, this tool gets access. You normally it's one push of a button and the tool gets access to it. If you're open source, a fair code license, you cannot do it, because to be able to do it, you have to provide you have to create a special OAuth app with that application. You have to provide like a secret and an ID. And obviously we cannot ship that to our users. So meaning our users have to create these IDs themselves. Yeah. That makes the authentication sometimes very hard. And in our cloud solution, we can again use OAuth like it was supposed to be. So again, you can authenticate with the push of a button, meaning especially tools like for Google, like sometimes it's literally, I think it's a 14-step process to get this thing set up, and the cloud solution is literally one click again, and so it takes care of that. Also, are we very competitive pricing wise? Like all the tools like Zapier and Integromat, they literally charge you for each step, sometimes even for each data package you send through a node. So like through a workflow, meaning like if you say you have 1,000 credits, it doesn't mean you can execute a workflow 1,000 times. It maybe means you can literally execute one workflow 4 times if it takes 250 credits for each execution. We have, for example, one workflow where we can check if there's any documentation missing for any nodes. So literally it means it would take one credit for each node we have to check. So running that one workflow would cost like around 300 something credits on something like Integromat or Zapier, which I think Zapier is like 750 free.
It depends on the but
Zapier
is very expensive.
Yeah, it would get eaten up very fast. Also, something Integromat, I'm not sure, did it give 1,000 or 10,000, but it gets eaten up very fast. And on the other hand, we charge for whole workflow execution, meaning like that we charge exactly to execute workflow 1 credit. We give you 5,000 for $20. And that means you can literally run, depending on your workflows, you can run sometimes something that costs $20 on n8n. It would cost you $1,000 on Zapier, for example.
Yeah. No, I think it's really nice also, just even for the understanding that, you pay, the execution and not the steps, because then, it's like everyone can understand, okay, the execution, but then the steps, it's quite tricky. Like we have to explain it to our, the people we teach. Zapier, for instance, we have a short video just about that, because otherwise sometimes people, just one night, they leave automation running, then the next day they don't have any credit anymore. That happens a lot. So
I imagine so, yeah.
Yeah. So no, I think this is very nice. I'm curious to know a little bit what no-code tools do you use yourself? Because I can see that you're using n8n, I guess.
Yeah.
Is there any other tools that?
The main ones, like for example, like the n8n cloud website, n8n.cloud is, for example, powered by Webflow.
Okay.
I use that a lot. We also use a lot of Typeform. For example, when people are interested in getting professional services or they want to become a partner, we have a lot of automation set up with them. Also, Airtable we use quite a lot. I think that are the 3 main ones we use for the most things. And then obviously in the background gets then, n8n kind of orchestrates everything and sends the data around. And also like we use, for example, not Slack, we use also MetaMost. We have a lot of / commands that can collect data and that's all kind of crazy stuff. Sometimes that's quite nice to be able to do that quite fast.
Yeah, I can imagine. And it's nice because everything you do for yourself on n8n, you can share with the community. Also, I guess, kind of help some development.
Also, like we have, like a lot of companies have like this hackathons. Yeah. We don't have a hackathon, but we call Hackmation. Like we have like this one day every quarter where we have build different teams, normally of 2 or 3 people, and they then automate something. Either they automate something for the company or they build a product with no-code tools. It's always like great to see like how far can we push it, what other things can we do. And I think it's very great learnings there. It's always just nice to see what people come up with. So I think I can really suggest any company to do that, because like it's one day, it's a lot of obviously hours that you have to pay for. But if you think about like how much we get out of that day in the end, because then we have another, 5 processes automated that cost time every day that normally pays for itself very fast. It's just a lot of fun. It's like we really love them.
Yeah, it can be also a team building thing. I think it's a great advice. Well, this is all super interesting. I just want to take the chance also to ask you a little bit about the local no-code scene, especially in Berlin, because I feel like in Germany, this is where it's happening right now. Although, we've seen in the previous episodes that there are other people, but what can you tell us a little bit about this?
To be honest, because of this whole COVID situation, like didn't really matter anymore if you're in Berlin or anywhere else. Like everything is happening online. So I did not really have direct contact with people here at all.
Okay.
Like I know there are a lot of startups here also, like in Germany generally, and like you just mentioned before, like you also met some of them while you're here now on tour in Germany. So it's quite nice. But I think the whole COVID situation made that all pretty flat.
It's true. I can imagine. I think I wish I could ask this question in a different circumstance, because I feel like there would be probably more meetups or things like that if it was possible.
Actually, that was one of the things. Like when I started, and like I was part of the factory, for example, which is like a kind of a co-working space here. And then I thought, okay, I'm part there. I can give courses and can get the first users and I can get feedback. But then COVID happened, and literally we did not do anything in person ever for that reason, which is very sad. So I'm really looking forward to finally be able to do that and get some our users in, do something with some other startups, because I think there's a lot of overlap sometimes, and especially if you have like startups that do something like they kind of they don't compete, they really they work perfectly well together. And so I think there's a lot of interesting stuff we could do here, especially in Berlin, with especially so many startups around here. They could make a lot of sense.
Yeah, definitely. Did you have a chance, for instance, to meet the people that are doing software?
And I met with her actually last year, shortly before she raised a seed round there.
Okay. So I guess that would be interesting for them to have a node on n8n, or I don't know, and that could be interesting to there's some sort of collaboration to be found.
Totally agree there. And I had the same, a really great product, and I think it's very versatile.
Yeah, no, definitely. But I like the way that they don't handle the back end, so they definitely need something like Airtable for the data and something like n8n, let's say, for automation. And I as much as I think Bubble is amazing and it's like this all-in-one tool, I tend to prefer the more like modular approach, and to have something for the front end, let's say software, something for the back end, dividing like data and automation. So I think this. Well, we'll see. We have time. I mean, this is all like the beginning, I think, of a very exciting era.
Totally agree there. Like, I think it's also the nice thing if you have it modular, like you can choose again the best of the tool for your use case. Like, okay, for the front end, maybe Babel doesn't make sense. In this case, I use software or Webflow, and then for the database, I don't use Airtable, I use something totally else. And I think it's always great when you can use the best tool for the job. Yeah,
exactly. Depending on the context, depending on the means you have, also sometimes you can a lot of things can impact the choice. If you ever want to come to Paris to do a meetup, when that will be possible. Right now it's kind of possible. We've been organizing things, but that would be great. I mean, we'll be very happy to organize.
It would be great.
n8n meetup in Paris. So.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
And there's already some users in the community, in the French community. So I think you even have like a French part in the forum now.
Correct, yeah. We opened like 1 or 2 months ago. It's like then not as many users as we hoped to. Like there were some people posting in French in English forum. I thought, okay, it's probably a good idea to do that more, but it's also more on us to probably cater more to the French community. But that will be great. We'll be happy to help that. Just to conclude, in terms of Berlin, well, let's say 2 questions. In terms of working in Berlin, for instance, what would you say about people coming here to maybe start a company, work as a freelancer? Is it a good city for that? I think like actually Berlin is, I think, the perfect city for a startup. Like if you just think about, in my case, like I mentioned before, I had another startup at the same time. I worked 2 or 3 days per week at a different startup to actually earn some money, and I have a wife and 2 children. Like, tell me another city where you can have a reasonable good life, working literally 2 days a week, and you can have your own project on the side. Like, it's not possible anywhere else. And that's especially in a city. We have a very huge startup scene, and like I think it's the place to start any kind of startup for sure. And also, I think the things are, housing is still reasonable, cheap. Generally, everything is still payable, and you can have a good life. You have a big community of developers that also still, because the prices are generally low, you can have, compared with San Francisco, like we literally think some of the startups I talk with, they pay their interns almost like sometimes same salaries that you have to pay developers, or even similar developers sometimes here, because the prices are so crazy high. So why start a startup there, especially now, if you can have it in a city where you have like many of the same advantages now, especially now after COVID, than going to a place where you lose all your money without any good reason.
No, what you say, I think, is interesting, because some people might say, okay, you can go to Bali or I don't know, Thailand, and work 2 days a week and have a decent quality of life. But what you don't get is like this crazy stimulation of scene, of developers, of people, of startups. And okay, like there's not really meetups and things now, but you meet people who are in this. You also, of course, you get that in San Francisco, but here is like the best of both, I think.
I think it's a perfect combination. Even then, like, normally I don't do a lot of meetings generally in person. and also, for example, avoid investor meetings, but like I can just do them over lunch. Like I have to eat at some point anyway, and they're coming to Berlin to meet some other startups. So I just, okay, let's do a lunch meeting, and you cannot do that in Bali. And I think it's so nice to talk with people in person.
Yeah, definitely.
That's, I'm not a big Zoom fan, especially if you work with people for years, then to come. There's a great opportunity to meet the people then in person. That's easier in Berlin than in Bali. But they're better as
totally
person.
Agree. Yeah, no, definitely. Last question, really out of no code, just really for purely touristic reasons. What's your favorite thing to do in Berlin? You know, that you would recommend to someone who comes visit? You know,
my favorite thing,
like one thing.
Good question. Depends on probably on their personal situation also. But to be honest, I think it's just nice. There's so much around Berlin. Also, like I really suggest anybody to go to Potsdam. It's like you can go. It's like there's just a huge park, a lot of castles. You can walk there, see nice stuff, especially with family. Like get out in the air. And also there's some others. And there's also Spreewald to drive to the south. It's like it's a little bit. There's nice channels and where you can drive through. This old house is beautiful there. I think it's something that's actually the nice thing about Berlin is like you have this huge city and everything you need, but there's still so much stuff around that you can get out of the city quite fast, and you can also have disadvantages.
It's something that in Paris we have. When you get outside of the city, you have long suburbs. You know, you have long time to cross through the suburbs, and they're all like pretty shitty, to be honest. Okay. And that's what I like about Berlin. It's like once you're outside of the city, you're in the countryside straight away, and you have all those amazing lakes, the forest, and so
That's really great. Especially lakes are great in Berlin. There's so many around here. It's like great in summer. Yeah,
nice, perfect. Well, thank you so much for all this, and I hope we have a chance to meet again, maybe in Paris, and we will definitely keep following everything that's happening with n8n.
Thanks a lot. Really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks again for inviting.
Thank you.
Take care. Ciao.
Thanks a lot for listening to this episode until the end. What a fascinating conversation again. I hope you didn't find it too technical, but honestly for me it was great to have a chance to go a bit deeper in some of those technical stuff. And also getting to explain a bit more about the open source was great. Please, if there were some parts that were still not clear, please get in touch with me. I'll be very happy to explain anything, because I feel the technical things should never get in the way of understanding the core concepts. After Jan, I have 2 more meetings planned in Berlin. Unfortunately, also a couple of people I really wanted to meet were not available, but I already knew I will have to come back here soon anyways. As always, please don't hesitate to write me on Twitter. Let me know what you thought about the episode. I'd love to have some feedbacks. And see you in the next episode.